Well, hello there, and good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon when it is that you're listening to this webinar. Glad to have you with us today, and welcome. My name is Brian Allen, and today's webinar is Cover Letters and Other Job Search Letters, subtitled The Power of Letters for a Successful Job Search. It's my pleasure to be with you today. I am a senior consultant with Career Management Partners, and it'll be my pleasure to be your host as we explore this very critical topic in a modern job search, which many people think perhaps cover letters are old-fashioned and no longer necessary in today's modern age of electronic communications. However, I think you'll find that's not necessarily the case, and therefore it still is critical that we be able to produce strong cover letters and other kinds of letters in order to support our candidacy for various jobs, and perhaps even to introduce ourselves to a situation where there may not be a job yet, but maybe they're looking for someone like us. Letters can be extremely powerful and effective in a modern job search, and that's the focus of this webinar. We are so glad that you're with us today. All right, so let's go ahead and just jump right in. There's no housekeeping rules because this is not a live webinar. This is a recording, and so you should be able to see the slides on the screen, and let's get started. Here is our agenda. We'll talk a little bit about what employers want and how it should influence how you begin to create your letters. We are going to identify and talk about 6 different letters that can be used at different times during a modern job search, and explore them in some detail, show you examples, and kind of discuss the rationale behind why they are created the way they are. We'll talk about how you can prepare for creating your letters. We'll spend a lot of time looking at the most important letter, of course, which is the cover letter, the letter you send when you're applying to a position that has been posted, that you are introducing your resume that you are sending along. And so it's covering your resume. That's the title for that. But then we'll also look at the 5 other letters, and then we'll spend time with what not to do, or we call that the never never list, things that you should avoid in order to make sure you're putting your best foot forward in writing during the creation of these different tools. And as with all of our webinars, we'll recap some of our key points at the end of the webinar. So glad you're with us, and let's get going. All right, so you really need to be thinking about, or have your mind kind of consider what it is the employer is wanting when you're talking about some kind of a letter that you're using to move your job candidacy forward. What are the employer's need? What are their desires? What's their situation? Now, some people may think that nobody reads cover letters anymore. Is this a true or a false statement? Well, we happen to think that for some companies it is a true statement, and for some positions, for example, if it's a entry-level job, perhaps, if it is a job that there's a mass hiring going on, if there's just a job that there's a high turnover, and so the company is constantly hiring and recruiting for these kinds of jobs, the cover letter might not get looked at inside an organization where they're having those kinds of hiring situations, but just because of the volume involved in the number of applicants. However, we would suggest that in the best companies that statement is false, that the best companies do pay attention to cover letters, and that a well-crafted, a well-written cover letter can do its job. And the cover letter's job is to get your resume read, create attention in you and your resume, so that they will then turn the page and consider what you have to offer based on what's in your resume. Now, there's other kinds of letters as well, of course, but when we're talking about cover letters, these are the things. So, and today, the reality is that an impressive cover letter can do a number of things for you. It can help to make you stand out against or above the other candidates who are also applying for that position. It can show that you have the ability to write well and showcase your communication skills, which are valued in any position in the world today. It can show your unique personality and voice if you will blend that into the words that you're putting into your cover letter. It'll allow you to share your energy and passion for the role and for the company, which is always going to be a plus, because any kind of a candidate who just kind of ho-hum about I'm applying for another job is not going to be as impressive as a candidate who says, hey, I want to work for you, and convinces them with your writing and to that effect. It'll also demonstrate how your skills align with what they're looking for in the job description. And that's a key aspect of an effective letter, is that it should connect with what it is the job description is looking for. And ultimately, it'll show your conscientiousness and work ethic by being willing to go the extra mile in constructing and using a professional correspondence such as this. So these are the reasons why a cover letter works and is good, and people will look at them. The fact that you may not send a cover letter, or that you may send some sort of generic stock letter that you're simply copying and pasting from other letters you've sent before, that in fact can hurt you by sending a message of you're not willing to go the extra mile, or you're just doing enough, you're not really putting yourself into it. Now, these things are taken from, or these realities, I say, are drawn from surveys that have been done by the people who put together what's called the 100 Best Companies to Work For in America. And that was a book years ago, but now has turned into a yearly survey that is published every year by Fortune magazine. And it's quite a prestigious thing to be on the list of the 100 best companies to work for. And so those people are, kind of the best practices as far as doing their work and providing an environment for employees to grow and prosper. So these are the companies that we think are going to be the ones who most likely are going to be wanting, these are an example of the kind of companies that we think are going to be most likely to be impressed with a cover letter or some other kind of well-crafted correspondence for you. Some of the other results suggest that a well-written cover letter can improve the odds of a less qualified person getting an interview. 75% of those who were polled with that question agreed that was true. Yes, a well-written cover letter can get someone who's less qualified an interview, perhaps. Also, 91% agreed with the statement that an applicant who has done their research on the company or the position they're applying for will get greater consideration than those who just send some generic letter that does not reflect any of the research. So, it's worth it to put a little extra time into it in order to make that impression, because, again, people are noticing, and here's our opportunity for you to make a positive impression that makes you stand out above the crowd of the other applicants. Okay, now we're going to be looking totally at 6 different kinds of job search letters, and we want to kind of preview those for you here, but then we'll dive into each one in more detail as we go through. So the 6 different kinds of letters, obviously we'll be talking about cover letters, obviously, and of course a cover letter, again, is the letter that you send to introduce your resume when you are applying to some job posting, whether it's an electronic job posting that you see online at Monster, Career Builder, Hot Jobs, Indeed, some of those kind of sites, or whether it's a job that you perhaps see online at a company website in their careers or jobs sections of their websites, or if it's a job you hear about or a friend tells you about and asks you to send them your resume so that they can then pass that on to someone on the inside of the company, which is, by the way, a strong way to apply. Again, it's a letter that covers your resume as a way of your making an application for a job. That's what we call a cover letter. Now, there's also other kinds of letters. You can use a letter to correspond with someone that you have met or have been introduced to or have been referred to through someone in your network. So a networking letter is another kind of letter. It's a different letter. You're not really necessarily always going to be sending your resume. Sometimes you might, but it's a slightly different situation. Therefore, it's a slightly different type of letter. We'll talk about that. A thank you letter for after an interview has happened and you want to continue to make a good impression after having shaked their hands and walked away, or a thank you letter for someone who has taken their time to meet with you and visit and share some information about the job or the company, or maybe just somebody who's giving you some, a pat on the back and some tips about how to keep going or whatever. There's all kinds of reasons that we might want to thank someone by letter. And frankly, it's kind of a lost art these days. The thank you notes, whether it be handwritten or typed or an email message, I mean, it does not matter so much the actual format, but the thought is you're taking time to show appreciation for something that someone else has done that helped you out. And again, sometimes that's, like I say, a little bit of an lost art. It's not so much the norm these days as it used to be. However, it still can have a major impact, a positive major impact on your ability to discover and compete for job opportunities. So that's the third kind of letter, is a thank you letter. There are follow-up letters, letters that you can send. And again, when I say letter, it does not have to be necessarily something that you print out on a piece of paper, put into an envelope, put a stamp on it, and send it out in the U.S. mail. That's one option. You can also have an electronically created letter that you attach to an email. Or it could be the body of an email message that you send. I mean, there's a variety of different formats again. Again, it's just how you're sending the message is what we're talking about. And so a follow-up would be, something that you are going to follow up with a previous conversation or a previous commitment from an earlier meeting, that you're going to do something, or you're going to share something, or you're going to remind someone about something, et cetera, et cetera. So follow-up is another kind of letter. A targeted company letter. This may be new to you, but it's an extremely important part of a modern job search. And that is that you have identified some companies that you think you want to work for, irregardless of whether those companies currently have job openings or not. This is a bit of a more long-term, broad kind of job search technique or strategy. But who is it that's a leader in your industry? Who is it who is maybe growing in a growth mode and needs lots of people at this particular time? Who is it that you perhaps know many people who work there or have heard good things about a company, and you would feel comfortable being affiliated with that company? Perhaps it's a company you've done business with and you've always felt a connection or loyalty to them as a business. And now that you're in a job transition, maybe that makes sense for you to try to consider ways to affiliate with that company. Maybe it's just that they're in the neighborhood. Perhaps there is a big plant or a big office location for this company very close by to you, therefore it'd be a short commute. Whatever the reasons that you might identify a company as attractive to you, it's a smart technique for you to have a series of these companies identified that you not limit your job search to, not at all, but that you give more attention and focus to these companies, and they're called targeted companies. And you can introduce yourself blindly to a targeted company, and we're going to show you a letter that allows you to do that. Now, it's always better to be referred by someone, but that's a slightly different situation. And then the final letter is what we call a turn-down response. And this is often not at all considered by a lot of people, but whenever you perhaps have interviewed for a position and then you get the notice that they said, thanks, but no thanks, we hired someone else. That's a turn down, right? Well, can you turn that into a yes, perhaps? Can you make that negative news or that bad news into something positive? We suggest that it's possible to do that, and we're going to show you how, through a letter response to hearing the bad news, you might in fact be able to turn that situation around. Not necessarily get the job that you didn't, get the job that somebody else did, but you never know what the situation is. And perhaps you made a very good impression during the interview. The company had only one position, and you were one of 2 or 3 very qualified candidates. They had to make a difficult decision, and they chose someone else. That does not mean that you are not valued by them, or that you would not be a good fit for them, perhaps. Maybe in another role, or maybe in the role that you interviewed for, but somebody else got the job. But maybe they don't work out in the next 3 or 4 months. Or maybe they take another job before, even after they've already accepted this one, they got a better offer that they've been interviewing with, and they had to turn this company down, and now all of a sudden this company is now going back to the finalists that they had to turn down. Well, you may be able to keep your candidacy alive and fresh in the minds of the company that you interviewed for, even after they've turned you down, and we'll show you how that letter looks. Now, Yes, letters are still important in a modern job search. And overall, there are a number of reasons. They can improve your chances of getting interviews or finding jobs or just networking opportunities. They can show that you are qualified and a serious candidate. And a serious candidate, is the one who is willing to put in the extra effort to go the extra mile, make themselves look good, take the steps that others perhaps don't want to take. That does look good on your behalf if you do that. It will allow, again, communicate your own voice and style, show you're conscientious and willing to put in that extra effort. And it also, think about this, your letter may be the first chance you have to make a good impression and to stand out as the most qualified candidate. So it's worth the time and effort, because all correspondence does make an impression on the reader. Now, you need to think about 3 different things in order to determine what letter and what kind of input that you have into it. 3 things you need to keep in mind. First of all, who is the reader? Who's going to be getting this letter? And what are their needs? Is this a hiring manager whose work is suffering and productivity is down, and employee, the rest of their team is overworked because there's this opening, and therefore they really need to get a new candidate hired and in position as soon as possible? Or is this reader perhaps looking to the future and there's not really an opening yet, but they're kind of fishing the waters to see what kind of talent's out there, and they're floating a job description in order to see what kind of response they can get? There's all kinds of different needs, and you need to be conscious of those things. That then would lead you to be able to determine the best way for you to construct your message. In other words, what it is you want to tell that reader who will be receiving your letter. And then ultimately, you need also to have a call to action. In your letter, you're going to need to have something that tells the reader what it is you want them to do, or what it is that you would like for them to do in response to your correspondence. So you need to be thinking about these things in order to be really ready to prepare the letter depending upon whichever letter it was, in the most effective way. So let's talk more about the preparation. 3 main questions any employer or anyone who is reading resumes and cover letters has in mind. There's lots of other questions, but there's the big picture, the 1,000-foot view, if you will. There are 3 main questions that any employer has in mind whenever considering a candidate for a job. First of all, they want to know, can this candidate do the job? Do they have the skills and experience necessary in order to be productive in a short amount of time? Secondly, will this candidate enjoy doing this job? Will they be here for a while? Will they be satisfied? Are they going to be, do they really want to work for us, or are they just looking for a job? And thirdly, will we enjoy working with this candidate? Will they fit in with us? Will they be a good fit for our team, our culture, our family atmosphere, whatever it may be? Because what employers don't want to do is to go through the hiring process, make a job offer, secure agreement, and hire someone, train them, get them all up to speed, and then find out that that person is not what they appear to be on the interview process, and they in fact can't do the job, don't do the job well, or don't fit in well. They perhaps rub shoulders wrong with their coworkers, and 6 months down the road, maybe they have to start looking again to replace that person. That's what an employer does not want to do. So these are the questions they're going to have in their mind as they are looking for talent. Keep those things in your mind as you're preparing to construct your correspondence with them. All right, now, so let's dive into and look closer at each of these 6 different letters. And the first one, of course, is the cover letter. I like this comparison here that, and I don't have the author of this, but it's a pretty good comparison. The thought is that your resume really needs to deserves a professional, presentable, and suitable cover letter. You're going to be, and you already have, I'm sure, put a lot of time and thought and energy into creating a resume that it speaks well about you. It tells your story effectively and paints a picture of your possibilities. You want your cover letter to be equally effective in telling that story. And someone has said that a poorly written or a generic or a stock cover letter is like a wrinkled suit that's covering a pristine, well-pressed short. I think that analogy is pretty clear. So you don't want to have a great looking resume and a lousy cover letter, because they would contradict, and it'd raise red flags. So how do you put together a cover letter? Is there one template? Is there one way to do it? And the answer, of course, is no. There are multiple ways to do this. What we're going to suggest, however, is a pretty good set of instructions as far as how to make a cover letter that is going to be successful in today's modern job search. And when I use the phrase modern job search, I mean where the internet is the preferred vehicle of communication, and there's lots and lots of other applicants, and there's a lot of pressure on the employer or the hiring person to get the right person out of the masses that apply and give them the opportunity. But that kind of pressure, that kind of time structure, the use of electronics to facilitate the movement of all of that is what I mean when I say a modern job search. So we are going to suggest this layout. We suggest that you put your cover letter onto the same paper or the same layout that you do for your resume, where you have the same heading at the top of your resume. I'm sorry, heading at the top of your cover letter that you have used for your resume. Now, this one we have here does not include a person's LinkedIn address, which we kind of include these days in our resumes, and we would suggest that you would do the same thing for the heading of your cover letter. We do also recommend that you use the same style and size of font that you have used in your resume to create your cover letter. So they really ought to look the same. They should look a match, if you will. The difference, of course, is that your cover letter is not a resume. It is a letter. It's business correspondence. Therefore, after you put in your heading, you should then structure it as a letter with a date. You have the person you're sending it to, the reason for the letter, the subject, if you will, and then a greeting of some sort. And you see that on the example here. So that's where you're different from a resume to a cover letter. It's actually a letter. Now, the greeting is maybe the first thing we need to talk about. What do you say? How do you refer to someone? And we recommend strongly that you take some time and energy to try to find the name of the person who will be receiving your correspondence, whether it's a hiring manager, a recruiter, an HR person, or some inside contact that you already know that you are going to be sending whoever it is, who is going to receive the letter, try to find that person's name. Again, the 100 Best Companies surveys have suggested that it's 70% of employers say that addressing your cover letter to the correct person will improve your chances of getting an interview. Now, that might be, you may think that's hard to do, but maybe easier than you might think. How can you go about finding the name of someone? Maybe it's not a name on the resume, on the job posting, although sometimes there are. If you look at a lot of job postings, you'll probably recognize that sometimes it says send resume and cover letter to Joe Smith and Human Resources, whomever it might be. So sometimes it's there. However, if it's not there, there are some places you can go to try to unearth or discover the name of the person that you would want to send your resume to or send your cover letter to. For example, your best choice is your network. Who do you know inside that company? Can you give them a call or an email and solicit their help in trying to identify who is the person who would be receiving the applications or the resumes for the position that you want to apply to? Or is there someone in HR that is the contact person? With a little bit of detective work, perhaps your inside contact may be able to come up with the name. And if you can get that, then you're going to be ahead of the game. Now, your network is the best place to go. LinkedIn is a tool then that can help you to effectively search your network. So again, LinkedIn could be a resource for you. There are other places to go, however. For example, inside the Career Workspace website that most of you have access to while you're working with career management partners. There's a button on the dashboard that says People. You click on that, one of the subtopics is Find People. And what that does, that puts you into or gives you access to a database from an organization called Hoovers. And Hoovers is a business intelligence arm of the Dun & Bradstreet organization, a big, well-known Wall Street group. And Hoovers gathers business information about all kinds of companies on a regular basis and makes that information available for sale to other companies, whether they're competitors or whether they're doing research or whether they're governmental bodies or professional associations, who knows, or investors perhaps even. Some people are going to want to know details about a company's life and activity. Well, sometimes information about some of the principals or some of the employees in that company is a part of that database. And you may be surprised if you are looking to find someone inside of a certain company that you're applying to. Maybe you'll find some names or some human resource managers. You might be able to get some names that you then can use to direct your correspondence. So there are ways to find it. Yeah, it does take a little extra effort, a little more ingenuity perhaps on your part. You may have to pretend to be Sherlock Holmes and do a little detective work perhaps. But that work could be well worth it if you can get the right name of the person and then address your correspondence to them. And it can really make a difference and set you apart. However, if you cannot find the name of the person, if it's not on the job posting or your research does not come up with any particular name, then you have to use a title like, well, don't use Dear Hiring Manager or Dear Recruiter. Those are kind of old-fashioned. And also do use Dear Hiring Manager or Dear Recruiter rather than To Whom It May Concern or Dear Sir or Madam. Those last two are the ones that are kind of a little dusty and a little old-fashioned. Dear Hiring Manager, Dear Recruiter, those would be more appropriate salutations if you cannot find the name of the person who's actually getting it. Okay, now, so, by the way, don't be too casual either. Hi, what's up? Those kinds of things are not professional enough, and you should avoid that kind of casualness. Okay, now, your first paragraph, and we suggest that there's, a good cover letter should have at least 3 sections, and however many paragraphs, but there's 3 different sections we want to describe here. The first paragraph, the purpose is to mention the position you're applying for, use that posting or requisition number if it's in the job posting. If they give you a number, make sure you use that number in your first paragraph of your cover letter. If you know someone inside the company who has referred you to this opening, mention their name. Show some energy right off the bat, though. So this first paragraph needs to not be just boring and tedious. It needs to have a little pizzazz to it. And throughout, you need to be conscious of attention span, the time frame the reader has. So, this is not where you need to go into a lot of detail about things. You need to have short, high-impact paragraphs in order to make it easy for them to read your letter and get a sense of who you are, and then make them want to know more about you. That's their overall goal again. Don't be shy. If you really want the job, this is your first impression and your best chance to get their attention. So, use your voice, use your uniqueness in some way. That's got to be professional. It can't be too casual. You don't know whether they're very serious or whether they're casual as well. So you don't want to err on that side. Here's an example of what we mean by a first paragraph. I'm thrilled to be writing to you about the care support representative position at Acme Manufacturing, position number 3654, which was posted on LinkedIn. I spoke to my friend Bob Brown, who works in accounting, and he thinks I'd be a great fit for your team. Okay, now in that one paragraph, you told them what you're applying for, where you found it, and that you know somebody inside the company who's recommended you. Those 3 things have been communicated in one paragraph, and those are powerful things to get someone's attention. Now, it doesn't have to say just exactly this way. Again, don't take our suggestions or examples here as gospel. This is not the only way. We are suggesting, though, a flow and giving you some examples how that flow might sound, but again, you make it your own. That's what we mean by putting your own voice into it. Now, it's always worth the effort to try that, to find that inside referral. And again, LinkedIn as a networking tool, or your network in general, is really, this is very often how one of the most important ways your network can be of assistance to you in your job search, is by being that inside person, that inside champion who can give you, as an outside candidate, the good housekeeping seal of approval, if you will, which can alleviate the concern that many employers have of, the risk they run of hiring someone who may look good on paper, but they may not be able to do the job. That concern is alleviated greatly if someone they already hired has referred the candidate to the position. It makes you much less of a risk of being a bad hire. So it's very much worth the time to try to find someone inside that could be that champion for you. Now, a second paragraph should have your communication about you and what you have to offer to this role. And again, it should connect with what they're really looking for, what their needs are. So you could say something along the lines of, and again, this is only examples, not gospel. Some of my strongest skills are aligned with the requirements for this position. They include detail-oriented. I pride myself on precise, error-free work and have been at the top 1% of my company in quality for the past 5 years. Team player, I consistently collaborate and assist colleagues with their work to ensure our team stays in the number one position in quality and productivity. Customer service, I'm frequently recognized for customer service and average over 97% in customer satisfaction surveys. Now again, these are 3 examples of needs that you have identified through having read the job description. These are things drawn from the words in bold print there: detail-oriented, team player, customer service. Those are examples of key words that you've identified in the job posting. And then you then have some accomplishment related to those keywords that you're bringing to their attention in this second paragraph. You have to be concise, however you have to do that. You can't hit all of them, and you may hit more than 3, you may only hit 1 or 2, but the point is you're connecting your success with what they're looking for in the job posting. That's what that second paragraph needs to do. Now, a third paragraph needs to then address your enthusiasm or why you want to work for this particular company. Things like connecting your personal values to the company's values, perhaps, or demonstrating that you've done your homework and gone beyond just looking at their homepage to do research about them. Cite the reputation of the company's leadership, perhaps, if you have some inkling about that. Or tell a story of what the company may have meant in your life somehow. Or describe how this role is in line with some of your personal goals. So now you're getting a little bit more personal. It's not just I'm an applicant applying for a job, but I really want to do this job for this company. Again, that's one of those big overriding questions that the employers are going to have. Keep it simple, but be honest and authentic and genuine. Don't just rely upon some words somebody else has written, because that can backfire on you. Okay, so here's an example of what that third paragraph might look like. My personal values are also a match with Acme's stated values of diversity, teamwork, integrity, and quality. Acme is a company that prides itself on its most valuable resource, people. It's a team that I've been wanting to be a part of since I read CEO Bob Smith's interview in the Wall Street Journal several years ago. The goals he described excited me, and I really grew to admire his entire approach to business. Now that's a very specific example, but see how it ties your desire to work for the company with some specific from your past. Again, reading an article or seeing someone interviewed on television, or the fact that a company supports one of your favorite charities. Who knows what it might have been, but it's an emotional connection between you and the company that makes them understand you are interested in working for them rather than just getting a job with anyone. And that's a way to set you apart from the competition. So then lastly, then you need, this cover letter is a way for you to market yourself and highlight your value. Stay away in this paragraph, though, from any reason, I need a job, or I've been laid off, or my previous employer didn't appreciate, none of that is appropriate. Leave all that for the interview, and hopefully it doesn't come up, but if it does, we can help you prepare to answer that effectively. But your cover letter is not an appropriate place to address previous employment or reasons that why you're now available. Okay, so a send-off is after the main part of your letter. You're wrapping it up, but you're giving them an impression of your energy and confidence about doing the job. It can be something as simple as, thank you for the opportunity to apply. I'm excited to learn more about how I can contribute. I hope this conveys a level of enthusiasm I have about your company, whatever. I very much look forward to speaking with you soon, and that's what we call a call to action. Now you're describing what you want them to do. You may also say something like, I'll call you, next week to ensure that you receive my cover letter and resume. All of those things are possible. But you do have to stay professional till the very end. So your actual sign off is important as well. Sincerely is appropriate. It may not be the most modern thing, but again, it still is appropriate and is a good option to use. Be careful. You want to maintain your professionalism through all the way through your letter. Your cover letter should contain a high match of keywords from the job posting. Therefore, every cover letter needs to be somewhat customized for the job you're applying to. Again, you saw earlier those three keywords that we drew from the job posting. Well, those are maybe common keywords, but don't assume that they'll be on every job posting. You can't use the same 3 words every time. You need to make it unique for whatever position you're applying to. Okay, so now what does this all look like? Here is an example then of that cover letter. All these areas pulled together, obviously besides the heading itself, where you've got why you're applying and who you know inside at the top. Then the next part of that is what your sales pitch is, what you have that they're looking for, and then the next paragraph is again that personal connection between you and the company, and then the final paragraph is your call to action. This is an example of a modern cover letter. Will yours look like this exactly? Of course not. It'll be different because you're different and the job postings are different, but this is kind of the guidelines that we suggest. Okay, well, that's a lot of information about the job, about the cover letter. Let's look at some of these other letters. The number 2 letter that we're discussing is what's called a networking letter. And this is where you're reaching out to someone you know who may have advice or information or referrals that you might benefit from during your search. You may send these letters to your contacts or people they refer you to. Maybe you will announce that you've launched a job campaign. I'm now available and I'm looking for, and here's how you can help me, sort of a thing. To request that others introduce you to someone new, and you're looking for an introduction to somebody. Or maybe just to request strategies, ideas, information, leads, feedback, that sort of thing. Maybe to uncover the hidden job market. And if you're not familiar with that phrase, I strongly encourage you after the webinar to Google that phrase, hidden job market. And you may be surprised to understand that most of the jobs that are landed every year were never advertised, and that they were identified by the person who got the job through some networking contact rather than through the internet. Well, that's called the hidden job market, and your network is how you can tap into that. And it also allows you to keep your contacts posted throughout your job search process, especially when you finally land a job and they've been responsible in helping you. You can thank them by this. Okay, so here's a sample, and again, I'm not going to take the time to read this, but there's a couple of different kinds of networking letters. This one is a letter to someone you already know. So notice the heading is a bit more informal, Dear Sam, rather than Dear Sir or Madam, that sort of thing. Bring up the fact that you have a relationship with them, you've thought about them, and you've thought about them often, help the family as well. Be kind of just a person first, but then let them know you're reaching out for a reason, and then let them know somehow about what it is you're looking for and how they could help you. So again, you're going to be more specific with someone you know. Now, another kind of a networking letter might be to someone you do not know, but you have been referred to by a third party or a mutual friend or a contact of some sort. So you notice at the top the greeting is a bit more formal, someone you don't know. You are then very early tying that person to the person who introduced you to your mutual contact. Then you have to explain yourself, and then you have to tell what it is you're looking for. And if you see at the next to last paragraph here, it says, I will contact your office next week to reach out to schedule a time to either talk or meet. Now that's a little bit more assertive, but again, this is not someone who has a job necessarily, but perhaps someone who might have some information about the job or might be able to introduce you to someone. So it's a little bit of a different situation. You might be justified in being a little bit more assertive with your writing here. So a networking letter, and there's all kinds of reasons for a networking letter, but it's a different tool. Third tool is called a thank you letter. Thank you letter is appropriate whenever you have had an interview and you want to maintain a positive impression after the interview is over. After you've had a networking meeting and met someone for the first time perhaps, or you've met with someone, they've given you some information. Maybe after a recruiter has reached out to you and you are introducing yourself to them by letter. What is it that you're thankful for? What is it that you appreciate? That should be what goes into the letter. Now, 75% of interviewers have said that receiving a thank you letter from a candidate does affect their decision-making process. Now, that does not to say that that will guarantee you'll get the job. That's not the same. But it does make a positive impression. And if you can do this, maybe even shortly after an interview is over, then the positive impression hopefully you've made during the interview is going to be reinforced by another positive impression as a result of this thank you letter. So here's an example of what a thank you letter might look like to a referral, having met with someone. And again, it's a little bit more, we have a little, some fill in the blanks things here that can be considered a template. But this one is a pleasure to meet with you on date and time. I appreciate you considering me for this or whatever we talked about. I was interested in your comments about, you can customize your letter with details related to whatever that meeting was. After our discussion, I now have a clear understanding of the job responsibilities, priorities, and your expectations. I'm confident my qualifications match the requirements. Specifically, these include, and then bing, 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 bing. Again, you're drawing from qualifications that they're looking for that match, qualifications you have that match a requirement that they're looking for. And it doesn't have to be for, but again, this is the middle part of that. That's the sales pitch part of your correspondence. You can also mention something you forgot. Notice after the 4 qualifications there, it occurred to me that I should have also mentioned this, that, or the other that may be of interest to them. Now, sometimes I should have said this. If that happens after the interview, here's a way in your thank you letter that you can bring that into the conversation even after the interview's over. I'm extremely eager to be a part of your team and work for XYZ. Looking forward to our next step in the hiring process and meeting with you again. Again, these are only samples, but again, the idea of how a follow-up thank you letter might be constructed. Fourth is what we call follow-up letters. Follow-up letters are not necessarily the same as a thank you, because they may not necessarily immediately be a response to something that someone did for you, but it is a way to stay in touch. It is a way to continue to be in contact with someone. Maybe just to keep them posted on the progress of your job search, maybe to find out about how your application is progressing within the system. You can send that to a company that maybe you have not heard from in a while. To restate your interest in the job if there has been silence from an employer for a period of time. By the way, we strongly encourage you never to assume silence means rejection. These days, very few companies really take the time to send a rejection letter. By the way, if you apply to a company and they do send a rejection letter, that's a clue that that company is, it takes its HR work seriously and its reputation seriously. That may be one indicator of a high-quality organization. Not all of them will do that, however, sometimes the flood is just too much that they only correspond with those people that they do want to hire, and everybody else kind of has to wonder. But on the other hand, don't assume always that silence means rejection. There are literally 1,000 reasons that an employer or an interview process may get delayed or interrupted or halted even in the middle of a process that could, may not be communicated to you. I mean, the finance department may pull the money. There may be a hiring freeze. There may be something that happens in the world like 9/11 that puts everything on. Who knows what it is. So again, don't assume silence means rejection. So a follow-up letter then could be a proactive way to end that silence by just reinstating your interest in the job. Maybe you can reconnect with a recruiter or someone that you know, or someone has referred you to an interview. So be thinking, who is it that I need to keep up to date or follow up with, and what kind of letter can do that? This is also a great way to stay connected and keep your name in the forefront of the hiring manager's name, or hiring manager's mind. Again, for maybe they didn't hire you for the immediate position, but a follow-up letter in the right way could perhaps position you for a future opportunity. Here's what that might look like. Again, by the way, the slides that we have are going to be available for you on our website under the webinar materials section. But again, don't use these words only. Just use this as an example of how to follow-up letter and to keep your candidacy in the forefront of someone's mind. Again, though, you start off by reminding them about the position or when you met or what your conversation was about. Again, you can bring up something you should have mentioned or something that's happened since that may be relevant to their consideration of you. An example here is, I took an advanced Excel course to reinforce my skills, as I know this is vital to success. I also met with someone who thinks I'd be an app. So you can plug in those recent activities or recent learnings that might be relevant to their understanding and their consideration of you. You see how it ends, though. Please let me know if there's anything I can provide to help you confirm that I'm the right person for the position. Again, that's a more of assertive, more, and I'm saying assertive, not aggressive. Aggressive would be, I'm sure you realize I am the only person for this job. That's more aggressive. Let me know if there's anything I can provide to help you confirm. That's more assertive. Those are not the same things. They're similar, but they're not the same. Assertive is usually putting your best foot forward. Aggressive is being a bit of a showboat. Okay, now another type letter is targeted company letters. These are letters where you are going to be perhaps introducing yourself to an organization that you have targeted that you think would be a good fit for your career. And maybe you do not have a job opening that you're responding to. You may use a a targeted company letter to introduce yourself to some employees that maybe you or maybe someone you know is familiar with and can introduce you to or refer you to. Maybe you can introduce yourself to someone inside the company, maybe an internal recruiter, part of human resources. Maybe you're just introducing yourself to someone that you have connected with on LinkedIn or some of their contacts. Or some contacts that you have found through LinkedIn or Facebook and the groups pages. So, be thinking about this. And again, we could have an entire other webinar about the issue of targeted companies and what to do with them. But is there a company that you would like to work for that you think would be a good fit for you and your family and your career aspirations? And again, there can be all different kinds of criteria. Well, you don't have to wait until there's an opening. You can throw your hat into the ring, so to speak, to become noticed, to be recognized, and to get into the system with a targeted company letter. But before you write this, you really need to do your homework. You need to research the company, understand what it is that you can offer, what they need, what their business situations are, how you can be an asset to them, how you can bring value to them. So this is where your sales ability for yourself can be demonstrated. Here's an example of what that might look like. In your salutation, you try to identify a specific person to send that to. And again, just sending it to whom it may concern is probably a waste of your time. But sending a letter to someone who you have the name of that would actually land on their desk is important. Show your interest and energy and make them want to read more with something along the lines of, it is with great interest that I'm writing to you for consideration for a mortgage processor position within Premier Bank. After reviewing my attached resume, I'm confident you will realize my ability to be a valuable asset to your organization. Again, assertive, not aggressive, but assertive here. You're putting your best foot forward. You're saying, I would be a great asset. I'm confident you'll realize that. That then makes them begin to think about, well, what does this person have to offer? So the body of your letter then goes into those key strengths, some of your achievements or qualifications that connect with what you've learned about them and their business and their needs. And closing then could be, in addition to my attached resume, a personal interview would reinforce my skills, work ethic, and ability to make a major contribution to your organization. I welcome the opportunity to meet with you. I'll call you next week to confirm receipt of resume. And then some sort of a sign-off. Okay, so this is a bit more of a gamble, I would guess. You know, this bit would require more, you know, confirmation on your part, more desire, more confidence. It can be done, however, and it has been done many times, and it's a proven tool, but it is a more perhaps challenging and difficult one. Now, the pro tip that's on the screen, I would suggest would go for any kind of a letter, any correspondence at all, resume, cover letter, networking letter, whatever it might be. You have got to proofread all of your correspondence and make sure that it is perfect, just as you have to do that for your resume. No kind of mistake, flaw, error, grammatical spacing, punctuation, spelling, none of that should be allowed into any of your correspondence. So that may be one of the areas your CMP consultant might be able to help you with. We're pretty good at being those proofreaders, and so let us do that, because your quality really does count, and it's worth the extra time and effort that you may have to put into doing that. Okay, the final type of letter is what we call a turn-down response letter. And again, this is a thanks but no thanks situation where you have applied, maybe you've been interviewed, maybe you've had multiple interviews and find out that the job went to someone else. That's what we mean as a turn down. You can perhaps take advantage and make the lemonade out of lemons that presents to you by utilizing this kind of letter. You can send this letter whenever you want your resume kept for future consideration. And if this is a targeted company of yours, and the fact that they did not hire you doesn't change the fact that you would still like to work for them someday, this could be a way for you to keep your candidacy on the positive. Maybe to reinforce your eagerness to work at a company when some other opening arises. To build your brand and reinforce relationships that you may have started in the initial interview process. So think about, what is it that you want them to keep in mind about you for their next opening? And that's what you would want to put into your turn down response letter. Now, this should be gracious, and you should be professional. No sour grapes, no, I can't believe you didn't hire me, none of this sort of thing. It's got to be on the up and up. But really, the reality is sometimes the no that you might get really does not mean that they are no longer interested or that there's not some future possibility for you. And so this turn down response letter might be a way of keeping the relationship on the high side. So here's an example of what that might look like. And again, the salutation, thank you for the opportunity to interview for a position. Now, you're not saying, I'm sorry to hear. You don't want to go negative. I want to reinforce that XYZ is an organization that I would be proud to work for, and given the chance, I know I would be an asset and add value to your team. Any feedback you could provide me to grow and be a truly viable candidate would be greatly appreciated. I hope you keep me in mind if another position becomes available. My resume is attached for your records. Again, thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you in the future. Now, that's a very professional, positive, classy way to respond to a turn down to an opportunity. And it doesn't take that much effort. You don't have to use these exact words, but again, what you're doing there is being positive, reasserting your desire to work for the company, asking for feedback, which, by the way, sometimes HR departments are a little hesitant to offer feedback. That has sometimes backfired against them in the past. But still, it wouldn't hurt to ask. But again, this is a professional way of putting your best foot forward, even after they've turned you down and hired someone else. All right, so those are the 6 different letters. Now, just a few thoughts about what not to do, some mistakes that you need to avoid making. Never simply repeat your resume. The cover letter needs, or the letters that you send, need to add some new value that is perhaps not mentioned or not always found in the resume. It's just an opportunity for you to sell yourself, so use that to share new, interesting, useful information. So don't just regurgitate what's already in your resume. Never use the same cover letter for every job. Every situation is different, every company is different, so you probably need to take the time to create a unique, custom, relevant letter. You can cut and paste certain phrases or sentences, perhaps from previous letters if they are relevant. But again, don't just try to have one cover letter to be used for every situation, or one thank you letter for every situation. They all need to be kind of customized and unique. And stay away from saying too much. You need to be brief and concise, because it's a, this is not literature that you're creating here. It's business correspondence. So 3 or 4 sentences per paragraph, maybe 5 or 6 lines total for a paragraph, that is. Bullets where you can, bold keywords where you, like we saw before when we were doing the cover letter, the 3 keywords that you're drawing connection to. Those could be bolded. Make it easy for the reader to get this gist of your message, in other words. Never say you were just let go, or that anything about your past. Your cover letter, your correspondence always should be future facing. And any discussion about why you were let go, or why you're available, or why you're no longer working, that really is not appropriate for correspondence. It would be something you need to handle in in the interview. And it can be tricky, so that may be part of your consultant's practice with you as far as preparing for an interview. Your reason for leaving statement is what we call that aspect of our services, is to help you not only prepare, but also memorize and internalize that to where you can, on a moment's notice, give a honest and sincere response to a question like, why are you no longer with XYZ company? Never send a letter that has not been proofread well, and it's very difficult for you to proofread your own writing and your own life. That's why you need to perhaps reach out to someone. If you have to proofread your own correspondence, here's a little tip. Don't read top to bottom, left to right, like you would read anything else. If you're the author of the material and you're trying to proof it, the fact that you created is going to trick your mind, and your mind will jump ahead and perhaps miss something. So to avoid that, if you have to proofread your own, read bottom to top, right to left. In other words, start at the bottom right-hand corner and look at every word from the right to the left, and then from the bottom to the top. That forces you to look at each word separately, and that does not allow your mind to jump ahead into the end of the sentence or to the next thought or phrase, as it would be if you tried to read it as the way you wrote it. And never, ever, never, ever, never, never, ever say anything negative about your past jobs, your past bosses, companies, colleagues. Negativity is a cancer in a job search. If you're negative, even in your casual conversation, that's going to be working against you. So stay away from anything negative, especially in your correspondence. Always show a positive attitude. And employers are pretty good at picking up on negative connotations or negative emotions or negative signals, even through correspondence such as these letters. So always be positive. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our webinar. Just to recap some things. Finding a job is a numbers game. You have to keep at it. You have to reach out to people. You have to take the extra time and effort. The more people you contact, the sooner you'll find a position. Keep going, though, until you have an offer. Avoid the tendency to sit back and wait for what appears to be a promising opportunity. Take the time to send follow-up and thank you letters. Take the time to create a networking letter to introduce yourself to someone new. Take the time to have a target list and reach out to those target lists to throw your hat into the ring. Careful planning and full-time work, including your correspondence like this, will gain you significant rewards. And remember, your consultant is here to help with you. But ultimately, you're in charge. This is your job search, and you're in control of your success. Well, we hope that this information has provided you some thoughts and given you some tools. We'd be more than happy to follow up and give you any feedback or answer any questions you may have. Of course, in a recording like this, we can't do it on the phone like this, but please send us your questions related to this webinar. First of all, to your consultant. By the way, that would be your first recourse, is to reach out to your consultant. But you could also send your comments to www.careermp.com, and we'll be able to hopefully get back to you with some information. That's our webinar for this afternoon. I'm glad that you were with us. I hope this has helped. My name is Brian Allen, and again, this has been a presentation of Career Management Partners. We hope to see you again at another webinar soon. Thank you, and good luck.